Hello, I'm Gabriella Ragusa, and I'm a junior here at Brand New, and today I will be presenting my semester project on parasites. I will talk about three main classes of parasites, those being protozoa, helminths, and ectoparasites. The fright of the parasite. Parasites can be dangerous organisms, so before we jump into things, I'd like to take a minute to share a few interesting facts that I found while I was completing my presentation. Did you know that parasites make up more than 75% of all living things? Take a minute to let that sink in. Statistically, that would mean that every 3 out of 4 living organisms would be classified as parasites. That's a lot of parasites. They're virtually everywhere. Have you ever played hopscotch or jump rope? Well, fleas, which are a parasite that we will talk about later on, can jump 30,000 times in a row. I can imagine how tired their legs would be. And finally, my last fun fact to you is malaria has caused more human deaths than war and Mother Nature combined. It's estimated that around between 150 and 300 million people have died in the last 120 years due to malaria. That's a lot of deaths. I'd like to talk about some learning objectives from both Lesson 5 and from the syllabus in this presentation. So from Lesson 5, I'll be speaking on parasitic helminths and some unicellular parasites. And from the syllabus, I would like to speak about some microbial pathogens and how some unicellular and multicellular parasites have a connection to society and how they vary in size and reproduction and symptoms and all that kind of stuff. So just a little introduction on parasites. Parasites can be unicellular or multicellular. They can range between a few micrometers, which is very small, you can't see with the naked eye, up to 1 meter, which is comparable to about a little over 3 feet. Parasites need a living host, so they will live in the host or on the host. And pets are the most common transmitters of parasites to humans, so that means that they have a zoonotic relationship, meaning that the pet can easily transmit the infectious disease to the human, which I found to be interesting. And a couple ways that parasites can be detected are by fecal samples, colonoscopies, blood work, x-rays, or other radiographic images. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, we will talk about the three main classes of parasites being protozoa, helminths, and ectoparasites. So I'd like to begin by talking about protozoa. So protozoa are unicellular organisms, but despite their small size, they're actually very complex. They are sometimes referred to as the pinnacle of unicellular complexity, meaning that they are not simple. And the name protozoa means proto, means primitive, and zoa means animal, so they were primitive animal, meaning one of the first forms of life. They multiply in humans. They don't kill the host, but they do cause a great deal of harm to the host in most cases. If they would kill the host, then they would also die, so they wouldn't want to do that. And protozoa move by cilia and flagella, so locomotion. They're kind of too small to, move in other ways. They don't have arms and legs, so they have adaptive cilia and flagella. And then common examples are amoeba, paramecium, and euglena, which you may have heard of. They reproduce asexually by binary fission, which is when a parent cell divides and creates two identical cells that can also then further grow and divide. Protozoa are heterotrophic, meaning that they rely on other food sources for survival, as you could imagine, because they're parasites. And then Symptoms of protozoa, they aren't always noticeable, so you may be asymptomatic, and in worst cases it can be fatal, cause death, but diarrhea, fever, abdominal pain, symptoms like that are usually pretty common. Now we will discuss helminths. So the word helminth means worm, and they are multicellular. And to no surprise, since they are worms, helminths are invertebrates, meaning that they have no backbone. Helminths are commonly found in tropical climates and environments where the sanitation isn't so great, it's humid. That's the type of environments that they thrive in. The life cycle of helminths are a little bit different. They have 3 main phases to their life cycle. So they start off as eggs, and then they mature into larvae, and then the larvae hatch, and then you have an adult helminth. So they'll attach internally or externally to their host, meaning inside their host or outside of their host, because they're parasitic, of course, and so that's their way of infecting their host and staying alive, because of course, like we mentioned before, helminths require a host for survival and food and nutrients. So they produce sexually, and they actually have pretty complex reproductive systems, which I found to be interesting. They can be pretty small, a few micrometers, but they can grow up to 1 meter in length. So, you could confuse it with a snake worming around on the ground, but it could also be a helminth. And they typically live for a couple years, usually no more than that. Common examples that you might have heard of are roundworms, tapeworms, and flukes. And then symptoms include diarrhea, stomach pain, bloody stool, irregular bowel movements, cramps, typical things like that. Now, for the final of the 3 main groups of parasites, we will discuss ectoparasites. So pictured here, I have a tick burying itself into someone's skin, which is a little disturbing. So ectoparasites, like I just mentioned, they infest on skin, on the inside or the outside. They are multicellular and have very complex bodies. They can be probably confused for small bugs or insects due to their physical appearance being similar. They are capable of making pretty painful lesions on the skin, which can be visible to the naked eye if large enough. They reproduce sexually, so they have an interesting way of reproducing. So the female, once they have obtained a meal of blood, which is what they are hosting, that's what they want from the host, blood. So the female will mate with the male, and then a little while later she'll lay her eggs, and then she will die once she lays her eggs. So in a sense, it's kind of a suicide mission in order to reproduce. There are also some ectoparasites that have vectors that are capable of spreading diseases. A few examples would be ticks, so they can transmit Lyme's disease, and fleas, which can transmit the bubonic plague. Most people are familiar with lice, ticks, fleas. Those are examples of ectoparasites. And if you're infected by an ectoparasite, common symptoms would be extreme itching, of course, bleeding in severe cases, mental confusion, fever. Now, just to sum it all up, parasitism would be the relationship between 2 living species or organisms where one benefits, which would be the parasite, at the expense of the other, which would be the host. Parasites can't live without a host because that's their food source, and you can contract parasites by contaminated food, dirty water, not washing your hands, or parasites can get into cuts or bites or lesions. It's also common if you ever travel to a different country that you're warned not to drink the water. It's because your immune system isn't capable of fighting off all the parasites that are in their water system as the locals may be immune to. So you can actually get very sick that way. Symptoms vary, fever, diarrhea, cognitive impairment, stomach pain. Those are the main symptoms of being infected by a parasite. Now, the size, like we said, very small. Can't even see with the naked eye. You must use a microscope. That would be a couple micrometers to up to about a meter, which is a little over 3 feet long. So that's a wide variety there. Very small to very large. And then the sizes also, the reproduction methods, also vary. Binary fission, sexual reproduction, asexual reproduction. They cover all the bases. So, just to recap, protozoa, they were the very small ones that we first talked about. They move by locomotion, can't be seen with the naked eye. Helminths were the ones that resembled worms. They vary in size, large to small. They reproduce sexually. And ectoparasites, those are the ones that burrow on your skin and itch bad. Lice, fleas, ticks. They resemble small bugs. And then here are my references. Continued references. And that's all I have today. Thank you for listening to my presentation on parasites, and I hope you enjoyed.